welcome to Candid Conversations on our blog at one-on-one-candidconversations.blogspot.com, and of course here on YouTube. I'm Cliff Tour, and today I have a very well-known figure in the world of tattooing and other types of media, including book writing, blogging, etc. His name is Dan Henk. Dan, thank you very much for getting up a little early this morning and chatting with us today about what you do and how you do it. I appreciate it a lot. I came across your bio and I said, I've got to talk to this guy. He's an interesting fellow. Thank you very much for jumping in here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So you're a tattoo artist. You started out doing that, but I also see that you're a writer, a blogger, a painter. You do a lot of different things. How did you start out? How did this all come to play?
I think it's kind of hard to see how everything starts out. Like life is a rocky road, so you kind of like go with what works and you discard what doesn't work. But I'm just trying to follow the path to like make it as an artist, you know. So like originally, I wanted to be a comic artist and writer, and then that kind of transition, you know, into doing like book covers, and then transition. It went through a whole bunch of different like evolutions until I kind of got to where I'm comfortable now. And right now I own a tattoo shop, and so I tattoo part-time, but I also write and I also draw. And I actually do comics and I do book covers and stuff like that, but it's not my primary, you know, it's not my primary job. But I have a bunch of like part-time jobs.
Oh, so it's like a mix of a different bunch of things all rolled into one thing. So if you were promoting yourself out there in the world, what would you say the tagline would be? What would you, how do you approach people to get business for yourself? What's the way you interact?
Well, probably the best way of putting it is I just consider myself an artist. Like I think if you're, you know, a musician that writes really good songs, you're an artist. If you're a novelist, you write really good stories, you're an artist. You know, so they're all different forms of art, and there are a couple that I really enjoy. It's where the job takes me. It's like if I have a writing project, the thing with writing projects is most of them you can spend your time on them. So you know, I'll be working on that, and then like if I do a book cover or if I do something for a magazine, for a comic book, they usually have a deadline, and so then I try and meet the deadline. And if I tattoo somebody, the way it works now is they come in, they have a consultation with me, we discuss what they want and where they want it, and then I'll fit them in my schedule. So that I have a deadline on. So some stuff is a little more open ended, and some stuff is more like I have to meet a very strict, you know, schedule.
Oh, I see. So it's dependent on the job.
It's
Okay.
depending on the job. I mean, I'm fortunate not to have a 9 to 5 job, which I've had before, and I hate those. But you know, you have to meet deadlines.
Yeah, and that's the one thing with writing. I know being a blogger, it's just like, okay, when I can get to it. Of course, I have a regular full-time daytime job from Sunday to Thursday, but in between I do all these little extra things here and there and survey work and so on. But like you said, it's dependent on what's coming up, who's looking for what, and of course any time constraints that you have to come into line with as you go forward and do the work. Um, but I guess that's what brings out those creative juices, because I took a look on your website and there is some really stunning art on
Yeah,
there.
thank you.
Yeah, it's just like really incredible work that you do. Um, what kind of genre would you say you mostly go for? Like, what's the kind of thing that you kind of dive into?
Well, I think that I got this tagline mainly from my editor, and like the what I do is not like I like horror a lot, and I like sci-fi a lot, and I do this kind of weird combo that he calls it speculative fiction. You know, so probably I don't know if that applies as much to like artwork, but it's like a darker, stranger take on stuff than is normal. And often that'll include elements of sci-fi or elements of horror, but I don't like to stick straight up with like sci-fi or horror or any one genre.
Yeah, that plainly comes through when I look at the website and I see some of the artwork. There's a definite horror motif there that one sees, and it's really quite. In some ways, it's a little jarring, and in other ways, it's like, wow, that's deep and really, really detailed. And in this genre, it seems like you really have to be detailed. Is that a correct statement? Would that be accurate to say that in horror, particularly as far as creating this kind of art, you have to be very detailed? Is that true of the art?
Well, I would say I would take a slightly different approach to it. I would just say that it's not that you necessarily have to be detailed, you have to be good. Because the thing is, it's a heavily judged like horror and sci-fi and all that stuff. People love to like they love to be Karens about it. They love to find everything they can possibly find wrong with it. And so, if it's a really strong, good story, then it holds up. But yeah, people like to pick stuff apart, and they especially like it when it's a little bit off, a more mainstream genre.
I see. Okay. So it's kind of like yeah, you it's very. Would I say that, or would I be correct in saying that it's very niche kind of work? Is that more or less?
It is. It's become less so over time. Like one of my favorite authors, H.P. Lovecraft, who made up Cthulhu and all that sort of stuff. He died broke. Like nobody bought his stuff. If he was alive now, he'd be a multimillionaire. It's just that genre has expanded a lot. People used to have like I think I don't know if they had a much more limited scope of what they considered possible, what they consider interesting. But I think that there's been a lot more interest in stuff that's sci-fi and horror and so on in these later times. As things evolve, it just becomes part of popular culture. Like I remember back in the 80s when I first got into comic books with the first time I really got into it is when people like Alan Moore with Watchmen and Frank Miller with Dark Knight came out with like more adult oriented, well written stuff as opposed to like just graphics for kids stuff. And I remember people put that down. And I remember if you like comic books, you were a nerd. Nobody wanted anything to do with you.
Mm,
And so and now it's just kind of accepted. I mean, you have like some of the top athletes and some of the top, rock stars like talking about like, oh, I love this comic book. Like Jordan Way from My Chemical Romance writes Umbrella Academy, and Netflix picked it up, and now it's a series on Netflix. So it's completely changed.
well, yeah, which is good for people like yourself who
Yeah,
are out there.
definitely.
Yeah. One of the things too, like getting to the tattooing side, is that even tattooing has come out into the more of the mainstream. At one point, particularly in cultures like the Japanese culture, it would have been really taboo to have a tattoo because you would be associated with organized crime and the criminal element. Do you still get that even today, or do you think now that's really changing as well as far as tattooing goes?
Well, first of all, tattooing has changed a lot. I think they did a statistical study, and it was like 80% of the population over the age of 36, or under the age of 36 rather, is tattooed.
Mm.
So like a tremendous number of people are tattooed, and it's way more acceptable. It's way more acceptable to do more artistic looking things as opposed to like folk art, which is what most tattooing was. I know in Japan, I don't know if it's fully legalized, but I know it's still heavily looked down on.
Mhm.
And I know at one point, like you couldn't go into any public space with visible tattoos. Like if you went to like a public bath, you were not allowed in, male or female, if you had any tattoos.
Mhm. Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, a lot of people associate, as some of the older generation, I would say, like people like around my age. I don't, of course. I'm pretty open-minded, but a lot of people around my age group still think of that as, oh, those are the army and navy guys and the tough guys and the mafia dudes. But that's not really the case anymore. As you pointed out, people under the age of 30 are now getting tattoos, and that's, helping you out. What would you say is the more common theme as far as people getting tattoos today? What kind of things are they going for?
Well, that's changed a lot. I mean, the whole industry changed a lot. Like it used to be, there was basically big style folk art, so there was a limited number of images, and they were considered kind of like valid tattoo images, and everything else was just considered like you're a weirdo. Why would you get that? What's going on? It was just like considered off the way. And you had a lot of people that were a lot more like grumpy gatekeepers of the whole thing. They'd be like, that doesn't look like a tattoo, or like they're trying to regulate what people can get and what they can't get. And then, it's kind of a mixed bag, but a lot of those TV shows kind of opened up to the general public, like Ink Master and stuff like that. Like they're on one side, they're heavily edited, and a lot of the stuff that they say is incorrect and is kind of a bane to the tattoo industry. Like, if you have a good artist, you can't just walk into a shop and say, "Hey, I want to start a back piece." No, you need a consultation. You shouldn't put time limits on that. So there's a lot of stuff that's not good that they do. But one thing they have done that's good is they've made it more widely available to the general public, and people see you can be an artist and you can do well rendered things on people that aren't just like little tiny folk art pieces. And the average size of tattoos has increased. Like it used to be a huge struggle to get them. Like people would want this little tiny piece on them, and they'd want even smaller than that, and it was a struggle just to get a little bit bigger. And there's like they'd want a portrait like about the size of a quarter. You're like, there's no way I can do that. They're like, oh well, I want to hide it. Now people don't care.
Yeah, well, I know that for a fact. I mean, we have people in my workplace who are pretty heavily tattooed, and you see them. The tats are very open and very clear. You can see that this person has tattoos. You're not escaping that. One of the things for the uninitiated I would ask is what should a person do if they decide, hey, I'd like to get a tattoo? What kinds of things would you recommend a person doing before going into a tattoo shop? What should they do?
Well, one thing they should do is they should definitely listen to their artist. I mean, the artist isn't like the end all be all. Like it's got to be my way or the highway. But a good artist is going to talk to you about what looks better. So it's good to go in with an idea. You don't necessarily have to have like a completed, image that's exactly what you want. But just go in with kind of a rough idea and be open to talking with him. And the best tattoos are collaborations. It's something I want to do, is something that I think will look good, and it's something that you want to get. So, and we'll just go over. We're like, well, do you like it more in this color scheme? Do you like it more in that color scheme, or black and gray? Like there's a lot of stuff that people have been tattooing a long time. Like I've been tattooing 23 years, and there's a lot that I know now that I didn't know when I started.
Right.
Like tattoos they should flow with the body. They should face a certain way. Certain images hold up better over time. There are things that you do to make those images hold up better over time. There are certain color schemes that work better. There's a whole myriad of like little tiny detail that kind of an expert in the field would know, and you should listen to them because they actually have a reason why they say it. All right, let me go into a little bit how tattoos stay in the body, because like for a long time people didn't know, and they've kind of worked out why they stay in the body, how they stay in the body, and what works better. So when you get tattooed, it goes through that first layer of skin, and that layer of skin dies, peels off, and grows back. So it's like a filter. That top layer of skin is like a filter over your tattoo, so it stays down, below that first layer of skin, with like all the little cells that float around. And what happens is white blood cells try and swallow the ink particles, but they're too big for them to get out of the body. So basically, every tattoo you see are just trapped white blood cells with ink particles in them. And over time, tattoos seem to lighten up because those ink particles that are trapped in the cells die, they get flushed out and they get replaced with cells that have no ink in them. So, you have certain color, like everything gets, lighter over time. And also those particles move over time. So everything spreads a little bit over time. But there are definitely colors that, you notice them lightening up faster than other colors. It's not necessarily because those colors are disappearing faster. It's just because they create the aura of, they blend in, so they create the aura of them disappearing faster. So if you have a little bit of a yellow in your skin tone and you get tattooed yellow on you and the yellow fades a little bit, it looks like it's more faded than it really is because now it's blending in with your skin tone. So probably the tattoos that last the longest are the black and gray style tattoos. The problem with color tattoos, some colors, they will totally stand the test of time. If they're put in right, they will stay with you forever. But different colors fade at different rates. And like I said, if they match up with their skin tone, they look like they're fading faster than they are. So if you do like a color portrait, the way that they're done now is like you basically play Bob Ross. You mix different colors, you create like a smooth palette and everything, and that works great for oil paint. But the problem is when you're doing tattooing and some of those colors fade out, so you can't see them as much as other colors, then the whole thing kind of falls apart because you need all those like subtle shades to make it pop out. Now, if it's done in black and gray, it all fades the same. So it's still going to look the same. It's just going to look a little bit more faded. And, you don't have any colors that match up with your skin tone. So it doesn't look like they just disappear. So the thing might get a little bit lighter over time. But if it's done in a decent size, it doesn't go away. It doesn't spread out and become unrecognizable. And it's, going to hold up. The consistency is going to be there. You kind of learn. I mean, there are also tricks you learn too, like you do an eye, and do like the black and the gray, and then you also put white highlights in there, and actually the white helps to trap the black, so the black doesn't spread as much. So you can make like little sharper images that only go so far. Because one of the biggest pet peeves I have is people, especially back in the day, they wanted everything small. But if you see people get like they do a lot now. They'll see like on Pinterest or whatever, they'll see lettering and it's super small, like about that big. And I'm like, that probably looks good for now. But you give that like a year and a half, 2 years, that's gonna look like a gray blob. So you just, little sharp, tiny details you can't get too small. And like if you do something like a portrait and you get the portrait decent size, you can kind of like play little tricks with the way where you make a whole lot better over time. But the whole thing shouldn't be constructed so it's too small to be readable over time and requires major work to even like hold up part of its visibility.
Okay, so there, in other words, it's choosing, as you pointed out, really in a nutshell, the correct color platelet for the body, and the shape of the body, to basically have a sustainable tattoo for a period of time that you're going to be wearing it, which is technically forever. Forever, that's it. Once you get tattooed, that's part of you now. And I guess that's the other thing too. You want to, as you pointed out, be a collaborator. So you want to make it partly yours, but partly the person getting that tattoo. Is that true? Is that the way you see doing a tattoo as far as working with the person?
Yeah, well, and there is stuff that you're not going to know as a customer probably, but the tattoo artist should know. Like when he constructs a tattoo, if you want it in color, he should make it so that in 5 years the parts that fade out a little bit do not destroy the image. So he should know how it's going to evolve over time, and he should construct it according to those those like pretty strict regulations. And another thing you do is you're supposed to make tattoos actually flow with the muscles of the body. And that's not something that like a regular artist does. Because I mean, you have a flat piece of paper, you can just draw on paper. But on the body, it needs to flow with the body, and where the body pushes outwards, you want the image to look like it's a little more forward. And where the body falls backwards, like away from a muscle, you want like some background, you want some like you want the sides of an image, you want something that's not essential to be pushed forward, because that creates the illusion of depth, and you need that. And that's especially over time as the image becomes a little bit less sharp. That's really important.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're really doing is you're using the body as the canvas, but you're making sure that that canvas breathes and the tattoo itself breathes as well. And that's how you want to, you know, put it on the person, and you want to make sure that person understands that. So that's where that collaboration comes in. That's pretty interesting, and it sounds like it's a real meeting of the minds when you're working with your customer to
Right. Well,
yeah.
people are a lot more open now to advice. Like I remember back when I started tattooing in '98, and it was like pulling teeth. You're like, well, the best tattoos are readable from across the street. You can go, oh, I see that piece. Oh, that looks great. You shouldn't have to be like this close to a tattoo to see what it is.
Yeah,
And then people, they might get a tan, they might grow some arm hair over that. All that stuff is a concern. So you should really listen to an expert in the field who probably deals with this stuff all the time and will tell you, this is what I've seen, this is what I want to do, and this is what I think it will produce, the results it will produce. And now people listen a lot more. Again, maybe it's because of the TV shows, although a lot of them are full of craps. like, especially the cover-up shows. Actually, let me go and rant about the cover-up shows real quick. So they do those like America's War tattoos and tattoo nightmares and stuff like that. So they will cover up a tattoo with another tattoo, and you'll look at that tattoo and you'll go, "Oh, that's amazing! I didn't know that white could cover up black like that." And how did they pull that off? They must be a phenomenal tattoo artist. Well, what happens is that top layer of skin, the one that dies, it peels off and grows back clear. When you tattoo it, first it's in that top layer. So if you take the photo, right after you do the tattoo, the top layer is saturated, so it looks like the whole tattoo is saturated. But as it heals up over time, like about a week and a half later, that top layer dies, peels off, and the old tattoo pops back through. So you should really be aware of how those tattoos are going to age after they're fully healed up. Like they never do healed up cover up photos. They do these amazing cover ups and they take a photo right then and there and they go, "Here you go, isn't this amazing?" It's like, yeah, give that a week and a half.
that's kind of interesting to hear because basically somebody's paying for this, and in the end, it's like, oh, that didn't work out too well.
Sometimes they pay amazing amounts of money for that. You're like, how did they get that much money? That's not going to hold up.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of almost like well, if I could put it this way, it's kind of like a almost if I could say a scam, in a sense, because you're promising something to someone that's not really going to work.
Well, not kind of a scam. It is a scam.
Yeah, yeah, that's kind of too bad, because it reflects on the industry as a whole and people like yourself who know that this is not going to work. So I'm sure when somebody wants to come up to you and do a cover up, uh, I guess there's a lot of conversation about, well, why do you want to do that, and how do we manage that, or maybe this is not something that's going to work out to you for you too well. So you might just have to live with that tattoo that you got. So if you got, mama across your chest and you want to put mermaid across there, yeah, it's not going to work out too well.
Well, I try and steer away from the why people want to cover it up. I mean, they're welcome to tell me, but that's not a requirement. It's more like, what can we do with it? And, what options are you open to? Because often people go, like, they'll go, oh, well, there seems to be a lot of black that needs to be covered up. So I'll pick a skull because there's black in the skull. I'm like, yeah, but there's also a lot of white areas in the skull, and you can't have those white areas go to black areas. So you really have to listen to somebody that knows what they're doing.
Yeah,
That might be the ultimate takeaway from all this. You gotta listen. I
you
mean,
kind of, yeah,
you don't necessarily have to hang on every word like it's the word of God and whatever they say is it, but listen to them. They probably have been doing it for a while.
yeah, absolutely. Now you do a lot of events. Do you talk about tattooing in your events? Because I noticed that you have a calendar of different events. What kinds of events do you actually do?
Well, I used to like I've been tattooing for 23 years now, so I kind of go through phases. And at one phase, I moved down to Austin, Texas. Great city, but not real big on the type of tattoos I do, which are like dark, detailed, do full sleeves and back pieces and so on. And I saw most of the people there were into getting like kind of the simple, iconic, tattoos that people are used to that are basically based off folk art. So I started traveling a lot. So I traveled all over the world. At one point, I was doing 27 conventions a year. Spent like a month in Europe just traveling from shop to shop. And I've done tattoo seminars both in shops and at conventions. And I do oil painting as well. So I've done oil painting seminars. I've done drawing from life seminars. I've done writing seminars. So it kind of depends on what people want to learn, what the market's for, what the convention is about. It does a lot of different stuff. But yeah, I've done that.
Yeah, it sounds like every day is a new adventure for you. It sounds like you're doing something new every day. And even looking at your events calendar, I noticed that you have some stuff coming up on Halloween that you're going to be doing up in New York.
Yeah,
Or
it's Elmira, New York. They're doing so one of the magazines that I write for is the overall company is called Tattoo Media Inc., but they put out a bunch of different magazines. They put out like Skin Art and Tattoo Review and a number of others as well. And they started a convention, and the first ever convention is in Elmira, and it's on Halloween weekend. And they asked me to tune in, and I said, "Well, if you give me and my shop all free booths, we'll go." So they go, "Okay." So I'm going to that one, and since we can drive there, you can like bring props and stuff and put it on the table, and we'll have like Halloween stuff, and we'll just try and make it look cool.
excellent. Sounds like you're pretty busy and you're doing a lot of interesting things. You've also got a book out as well. That I
I have
know
3 books out. I have
three
three
books.
books, 3 books and 2 chapbooks. Yeah.
Wow. So authoring is another thing that you're doing, and it sounds like you're still as like every day. I get the sense that every day is an adventure, and every day is new and interesting because of the work you do.
Well, I wish. I mean, there's a lot of adventures, a lot of cool stuff, but I wouldn't say every day.
Hmm. But yeah, it's that. Well, I guess there's some days it's like, okay, and
There's some
other
days
days,
I'm like, fuck, nothing's working. Why is this happening? Like I remember I like within a week my iPad stopped working, my iPhone stopped working, my computer stopped working. It's like when everything goes wrong, like everything together, nothing goes wrong like individually. It's like when it rains it pours. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
sometimes it's not great, but
But for the most part, it sounds like you're quite active and busy doing stuff. Where can people find you on the internet? Where can they look and see what you do?
well, I have a website. It's www.danhenk.com. So all my stuff is on there. All my books are on Amazon. They're at Barnes and Nobles. They're at Kobo. They're like the latest one is even available as an audiobook, so it's on Audible. But my website is like I have a blog, and all my latest stuff is on there.
Excellent. Well, Dan, it's been a blast talking with you today. I really appreciate your insight, particularly about tattooing. I learned a lot about that. Never knew. I've never gotten a tattoo. I've never thought of getting one. Well, actually, I have, but I've never done it. But now I understand. If I want to get one, I better make sure that I tap into somebody like yourself, who knows really what's going on and can provide a good consultation and
Well, after you get your first, that's when it really starts. Then you're gonna come back and want a full sleeve, a full back piece. You know, You get your head tattooed.
Wow, that's amazing. So it just it grows after a while. I noticed that with
Yeah.
people. It really does.
Well, the joke I make is I tell people we put heroin in the ink, so they always come back.
Oh my goodness, that's great. Well, I'm going to make sure to get this on our blog at oneononecandidconversations.blogspot.com, and of course on our YouTube site. Dan, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Thanks for joining us on Zoomed In with myself, the tour, and on our website. We'll make sure to get that up. And I appreciate you a lot. Thanks a lot.
All right, thanks for having me.